Okay. So today we're going to be talking about Section 3, which deals with some of the later West African empires, and also one empire that wasn't in West Africa at all. First, we're starting off with the Empire of Mali. Now, that laid along the upper Niger River. This allows Mali to control trade along the river, which is important. Rivers are always good for trade. Now, according to legend, Mali's rise to power begins under a ruler named Sundiata. I'm making sure I'm saying that right. Yes, Sundiata. The story says he's a boy, and a cruel ruler took over Mali, and Sundiata ends up building up an army and retaking it, and then he establishes this great empire of Mali. He then conquers nearby kingdoms, which includes the Kingdom of Ghana in the 1230s. So Ghana has officially come to an end, and now Mali is taking a bunch of the territory that once belonged to the Ghana Empire. Sundiata works to improve farming. He has new farmlands cleared, so he does some good stuff for his people. He expands the empire, and it becomes prosperous. He also took the title of Mansa, which is kind of a big deal. It's both a political and religious title. Now, he dies in 1255, but later rulers that come after him also end up using the title of Mansa as well. The most famous of these was Mansa Musa. He was extremely wealthy. In fact, as I mentioned yesterday, he is the wealthiest man in human history. He's worth approximately 400 billion of today's dollars, which easily puts him at the top of the list. He had immense wealth. He also spread Islam. This is important. Mansa Musa is Islamic, and he works to spread Islam in the Mali Empire. So you need to make a note of that. That's a big deal. He rules from the year 1312 to 1337. He added several new trade cities, one of which you've probably heard of and didn't know it was a real place, and is Timbuktu. You guys heard of Timbuktu before, I assume? Yeah. Timbuktu is a real place, and it ended up being a center of trade and learning and religion. So it actually was extremely empire, both in the Mali Empire and in another empire we're going to talk about in just a minute. It's still there today. You can visit Timbuktu. It's a shadow of its former glory, but it is still there. And I'll watch that in a minute. Now, in the year 1324, Mansa Musa had went on a pilgrimage to the city of Mecca, as all Muslims are expected to do, which of course means crossing the Sahara Desert. When he does this, he ends up introducing his empire, the Mali Empire, to the Islamic world as well. And so people start to hear about this great and wealthy Mali Empire. While he's in charge, while he's in power, he supports education. He sends a lot of scholars to Morocco, which is in the north. They return and set up schools in Mali. He encourages the learning of the Arabic language because they don't have a written language. A written language didn't appear in West Africa. In fact, they passed down most of their stories through oral storytelling and history keeping. And so they didn't have a written language. So he really encourages the use of Arabic in order to be able to write things down, to spread the teachings of Islam, and to spread knowledge in West Africa. He wants people to be able to read the Quran for themselves. He also had quite a few mosques built throughout his empire. Now, his son is a weak ruler. So when Mansa Musa steps down, his son's a weak ruler. He's not able to stop raiders that are coming into Mali from the southeast. They actually end up setting fire to Timbuktu, particularly the schools and the mosques, and Mali doesn't recover from this blow. At the edge of the empire, people are starting to break away, and by 1500, almost all the lands that Mali used to control have been lost. Now, back in the 1300s, Mansa Musa had conquered Songhai. I'm making sure I'm pronouncing all these right. Yes, Songhai. this is a group of people, a tribal group called the Songhai. He adds their lands to the empire. However, when Mali is weakened in the 1400s, the people of Songhai end up rebelling against the Mali Empire and gaining their freedom. And then they're going to actually make their own empire and pretty much absorb what used to be the Mali Empire. So the land that belonged to the Ghana Empire becomes part of the Mali Empire. The land that belonged to the Mali Empire ends up becoming part of the Songhai Empire. Now, Songhai rulers were Muslim. This enables them to trade with North Africa, particularly with a group called the Berbers, who are Muslim, and also easily trade with the Islamic world at large. Now, the leader of Songhai actually, who expands the empire, is named Sunni Ali. Or also Sunni Ali. I've heard it pronounced both ways. He became ruler in 1464. He's responsible for sacking Timbuktu initially, and then also he made Gao the capital city of the Songhai Empire. So make a note of that. That's fine, Alyssa. Now, before he took over, the Songhai state's really disorganized. It's kind of chaotic. He does a lot to unify the empire. He encourages everyone to work together. He brings a lot of stability, although a lot of people considered him to be rather cruel and tyrannical in his methods. He died in 1492, Sunni Ali did. His son, Sunni Baru, is not Muslim. Now, that might not sound like a big deal to us, but it was a big deal to the people of Songhai, many of whom were Muslim. They're afraid that if their leader isn't Muslim, they're going to lose their trade and trade agreements with Muslims in the north. And so they actually rebel and overthrow him. And a general ends up taking his place. That general's name is Muhammad Turi. And Touré, my mistake. He ends up overthrowing Sunni Baru, and he chooses a title for himself, Askia. It's a military rank, basically, and he takes the name Askia Muhammad the First. Now, a lot of people end up calling him Askia the Great. He's got several different names: Askia Muhammad, Muhammad Touré, Askia Muhammad the First, Askia the Great. It doesn't really matter. They're all the same person. It's just Askia is a title being used. Now, he's kind of a big deal. You need to know who he is. He's called the Great for a reason. He's also responsible for spreading Islam, again, more so in West Africa. So there are two rulers that are largely responsible for the spread of Islam in West Africa. The first would be Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire, and then Askia the Great of the Songhai Empire. He's also a big supporter of education and learning. He ends up taking the city of Timbuktu and Janae and making them into these centers for education, for knowledge. Scholars flock to Timbuktu for the learning opportunities, the universities, the mosques, the libraries. You wouldn't really think of it as being a center for those things now, but at that point in time, this was a very educated region, renowned for its educational facilities. Now, like I was saying, Askia is Muslim, so he does also encourage the spread of Islam. And he also makes a lot of laws that are very similar to those that are passed in Muslim nations nearby. Now, as far as maintaining order in the organization of the Songhai Empire, he ends up splitting it into 5 separate provinces, and he appoints new governors of each province, and those governors are loyal to him, which is important because prior to that, they would sort of allow local rulers who had always kind of been in power to keep their control of the area and sort of report to whoever was king. He doesn't do that. He starts appointing people in charge of these provinces who are loyal to him. It's a pretty major change that he made there. Now, unfortunately for the Songhai Empire, they're going to end up being attacked by Morocco, a nation to the north, which is also a rival Songhai. Now, Morocco actually wants their salt mines. Salt's very valuable at this time. Salt's still pretty darn valuable. So in the year 1591, Morocco attacks the Songhai Empire. They've got more advanced weapons. They've got cannons. They are more than capable of overpowering the Songhai, most of whom are using things like spears. They just aren't equipped to deal with that in firearms. Now, Timbuktu and Gao end up being largely destroyed, and Songhai ends up falling. Trade changes, their overland trade networks are declining because we see the rise of trade by the Atlantic Ocean instead of by land. And so this kind of is where the great West African empires end. Not completely. Some later groups are going to capitalize on trade by sea, but for the most part, these great renowned West African empires, this is about where they end, partly because of the introduction of Europeans to the region. I think that's where we're going to stop. There's one more empire I do want to talk to you about called Great Zimbabwe. Now, Zimbabwe is actually in South Africa, not the country South Africa. It's in Southern Africa. It's founded in the late 1000s and expands from a small trading kingdom and herding center. A small trading village sort of situation into a great kingdom at the center of a very large trading network. Ends up becoming very wealthy, particularly trading in gold. They end up building, if you look at this picture here, large, huge stone-walled fortress around their city to protect the capital. It's still there. You can go see this. It's in ruins, but the ruins do still stand. Now, in the 1400s, the gold trade declines, and Great Zimbabwe does as well because that was their main source of wealth. And that's where this section is going to end.